this episode of Soul Space Personalized. This is one episode out of a 7-part series that will be brought to you throughout February of 2023. Thank you to my guests, Rebecca Rose, Daryl, James, and Tony Rodrigues for being a part of this. The purpose or intention of bringing this to you is bringing to highlight some of the harder topics, some of the darker aspects of our world, so that we can bring a greater awareness and light to it. And not only that, but to share ways that we can all heal as individuals and heal as a collective, so that we can move into a more brighter, more liberated world with better understanding, more peace and harmony. So thank you for being here and watching this series. I hope that you get something out of it. Hello everyone, welcome. It's Alisha Brachet here at Cosmic Gateway. And over this month, I'm going to be showcasing a range of people that I'll be bringing in to interview. We're going to be diving deep into various topics of the Secret Space program, but we're going to come at it from a different angle. And what we're going to be looking at through the series of interviews is breaking it down and looking at the space component, the soul, the spirit, and also the personalization of the human experience. So I'm very excited today to bring on a guest. I'm here with Tony Rodrigues, who is probably, in my eyes, one of the key components that kind of unlocked a lot of doors for me. So I have a lot of gratitude for your work, Tony, and I'm so excited for you to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And it's humbling to hear that. I just say thank you when people are so nice to me, because I don't realize it, sharing my story, I don't realize who's seeing it or what happens on the other end. So I am very appreciative for you to say that. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I guess to give just a little bit of backstory, in November of 2020, I get a lot of information through my dream space, and I was given all these very specific details of the energetics, which is part of my work, of how a 20 and back actually works and operates. And when I woke up from that dream, I just kind of went, oh, I'm not sure what all this information is coming to me, or why or how. But so I sort of just parked it. And I think that was around November of 2020. And it was a few months later, I was at my parents' house and I walked in and my dad was sitting on the couch watching something on YouTube. And I said to Dad, what are you watching? And he goes, oh, there's this guy, Tony, and he's talking about the Secret Space program. And he goes, it's really interesting. You should watch this. And so I sat down, and as I sat down, literally you said word for word everything that I had been given in that dream space dialogue. And I just sat there with my eyes wide open, my mouth dropped open, and I was like, okay, I'm paying attention. And between then, which is almost 2 years till now, I've been unpacking so much information, and you've been absolutely critical and key. So I can't thank you enough.
Wow.
Today feels very auspicious because it's almost exactly 2 years since all that started to unravel, and here we are today having a chat. So
a lot's happened.
A lot has happened. So I guess for those who aren't familiar with your story, with your testimony, I know that you've, in the last 12 months, you released a book, and that one, and I think you've got a second book coming out too. Is that right?
I do. It's so right now it's still set. We're looking at April as the release date, like April 7th or so is what the targeted release for that will be on Amazon. It's maybe halfway through, and I'm going to really barnstorm it. I'm going to go down and meet the editors at the end of the month and finish it up in person, basically. And it's nothing, I don't want to say it's nothing like, but it's far less traumatic than the first book. The first book has a great deal of trauma, and a lot of people have a hard time reading it for that, for that reason. There's a lot of things. It was very difficult to write it because I would relive how I felt. And so it took me the better part of 6 years to write the first book, Series Colony Cavalier.
And I'll put that link in the description box below. If you haven't read it, if you haven't connected with it, I highly do recommend it. I devoured it in a couple of days, and then I kind of shared it with some people who I thought it was going to help. And I said to them, my advice was, just push through the first part and then
Right.
get into the second part, because it'll all come together and make sense. So
The thing about when I included all the trauma in the beginning of the book, the reason why all that's in there is because it's actually turns out to be a great deal of evidence supporting my testimony. And because there are so many other people that have come forward that have similar experiences, that there's a very large trauma component. And it's the key to, versions of mind control for people in these programs to do what they want them to do. So that stuff's in there, and I wanted to put it in there. It's not so much to bellyache or complain. I always tell people when I speak live, I'm not up here to complain. I'm a very happy person where I'm at in life, and I don't have anger about it all anymore. I did when I was younger. I was very angry, but I don't have that now, and I'm kind of happy with my life. But at the same time, it's what happened. And so people asked me to write my story down, so I wrote it. Everything I've done was pretty much by asking. People asked me, people, have you had memories? Please come forward. And I'd write an email. Okay, so what happened? And I've ever just answered. And that's my policy, is I don't go around forcing this on people. I'll answer to those who ask, because that's who's really ready for it. It's very difficult information.
Yeah. Can we go from the start? I mean, I don't want to go into the depths of your testimony, because I think that there's a lot of that information out there, and I would highly encourage people, if they feel a resonance, to go and have a look at other interviews that you've done and to read your book. But would it be possible to give like an overview timeline of how it began, what happened, the fundamentals, and just to paint that picture?
Sure. So I get asked that a lot. That's very common. Because, and then I can already tell you the questions that people will have when I'm done, because it's the same, people always go, wait a minute, there is a time travel component, and that's the hardest to understand. I don't think we as humans are really built to think about time travel in a way that is meaningful. We're just not. And so what happened to me is something called a career return program, as cited by a person that came forward named Jason Rice. Other people have nicknamed it other names, 20-year. I'd like to call it a 20-year tour, even though it really wasn't that. But basically, people that are being interacted with by certain government groups that are working with certain extraterrestrials off-world have traded technology to where they can take somebody. And if you look at a lot of existing abduction experiences where people go, man, I saw something and then something happened. I don't know what happened. Then we just woke up and I felt different. I can't explain why, but I feel like a different person. I don't know what happened. They wake up with their memories erased, and they think that the event was an hour or a half hour. They have missing time. They go, man, it was a couple hours. It was 9 o'clock and then it was 11 all of a sudden. I don't know what happened. So my testimony is that they have traded the technology to take somebody at a certain time and then keep them, be it through cloning or consciousness transference or time, whatever. I don't really, know how it worked, but they can keep you for 20 years in 20-year increments. Some people go several times, 20 years at a time. So they can take you and keep you for 20 years and then have the technology to put you right back where you started, in the same body, the same age, and you go right back to a few minutes later after you were taken. And so there's a time travel component, there's heavy medical component. And like I said, I believe that there's cloning involved. And then they're taking people and using them for labor and technical reasons, everything you can think of, person under the sun. But then they're being taken into space because there's actually an infrastructure of colonies throughout our solar system, many colonies, and there's actually millions of people that are living in the solar system right now that also many of them will be returned to the moment they were taken on Earth. So kids that are taken in the night, I was taken sometime around April of 1982. It was my 81 to 82 school year, and I was 10 years old, and I was taken on best I can remember, I was taken on a Thursday night, and I woke up Friday morning a completely different kid, and I felt like I didn't have the memories of what happened, but I felt like I had been gone for 20 years. I was disoriented. when I got up and went down and hugged my mom and dad, I felt like I had seen them in decades, and I was so happy to be home. And later on that day, when I got home, I had toys in my room, and I went through my toys, and I no longer cared about them because they were old to me. So the feeling was there. The memories and the logical passing of time was not there. This was not a dream. So as I lived throughout my life, I began to get the memories back over time, bleed through memories in, like you said, in the dream space. So it turns out you're really in touch, right? A few minutes before you wake up, you're really in that you're in that really high focus state, and you get to access memory and dreams, abstract things. And it was in that time I would get a lot of memories back. And then in the middle of the day, I would get memories back, and I would think, when did that happen? I would remember working on a spaceship, doing a job, and it wasn't dreamlike because it was actually sucked like work does. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, people don't really dream of their job very often. Some people do, but it's different. It's a dream. Like, I was remembering how uncomfortable it was, and how, the day in and day out, like the laborious part of it. But it was on a spaceship, and I thought, when was that? I could not. Sometimes I thought I had been abducted several times. I always had the memory of being abducted the first 30 minutes or so. Those memories never really got erased. So I had a gray ET in my face, and the reptilians, and I had met them, and I knew that was real. So in my life, I was always researching ufology. But it wasn't until 2015 I got an MRI scan of my head, and coincidentally, by sheer coincidence, a week later I came across the Randy Kramer information, and he explained how he called it a quantum time dilation, that they take people for 20 years and put them back. And he explained it, how he went through it. And I went, oh my God, that's what happened to me. When they took me, they kept me. And then all the memories just kind of flooded in, and they began to make sense. When I said all those memories when did I do that? When I said those are real, then they all came back, and they just flooded. And over the next few days, over the next 6 months, great deal of memories came back. And it was just too much to discount, for one. So then in my 20 years, I spent about 6 of them on the earth, privately owned, as slave labor. And I was in an early program. I found funding, I found paperwork and the locations and the jurisdictional work. I found a great paper trail around a remote viewing program that I was in during that time. And anyhow, because I was on the earth, I lived in places that I'd never been in my life. And some of them I still have never been to. And all of a sudden woke up one day and had great intimate details of those places. And I've investigated them. And that's when I went, oh no, oh, wow. I remembered a place in Seattle, a house in Seattle. I remembered a place in Peru. And I went on Google Earth immediately when I got my memories in 2015. It was May of 15. Just a few days later, I sat down and got on Google Earth, and I was, oh, there's the house. And I went, oh God, because I remember aliens and working on a spaceship and going to other star systems and all these other things, and terrible things on Earth of witnessing Satanism and people being killed, and working in Peru and the drug trafficking trade. And so they were fantastic memories. They were clear memories that made sense. Everything was there as I remembered it. What happened before that? Oh, that happened. What happened after that? Oh, that happened. And so I was going through this, unpacking these great deal of memories, and I was hoping that there was some reason that it wasn't true. And what happened was, I went to go and look for it to not be true. And lo and behold, I found the town in Peru. And it was exactly how I remembered it. I remember the fishing hole. I remember the stories, the wise tales of how the river turned color. I remember all these things. And then I found the town, the house in Seattle and everything. And then I actually physically went there in 2016, and I knew my way around. I knew the route on the road. We're almost there, a couple 100 yards up the road, somewhere I've never physically been in my life that I can prove. And it was surreal. It was just, and I have to trust. And so I said it exactly like this. I said, the memories of Seattle when I went there were freakishly accurate. It wasn't that they were vague and like, oh, there's a couple things right. Like, I was freakishly accurate. I remembered everything about the area. And so I I say it like this, and to anybody watching, if my memories of the Earth were that accurate in a time that I could not have been there, then I have to believe that the memories of space travel are just as accurate. So even though I can't find Ceres Colony Corporation on Google Earth and pictures of the craft that I was on, even though that's the case, I can't discount those either. So I have to present that information as my account, because what I'm really trying to prove with my testimony is the 20-year thing, the career return technology, that the time travel tech is that's all in play, and they're using people against their will for slave labor. That's really my testimony. The rest of it is, me fishing out evidence to support it. And sadly, I fished out quite a great deal of evidence.
Yeah.
We're working on it right now, currently. So it's been 7-8 years since I got my memories back. I am currently working on a website article that has an aggregation of all of my points of that support me, all of my evidence. I went and filmed my mom recently, and I got her on camera because she remembered me talking about it when I was a kid, and there were places in Seattle that I knew about that I shouldn't have known. And I would tell my mom when I was a kid, she remembered it. So I filmed her. I've got a short testimony, and then I have a million little bullet points of testimony. And then the biggest one was that I called out the salt spots on Ceres, on the planetoid Ceres, which is in between Mars and the asteroid belt. I called out the white spots as salt, and the early scan from the Dawn probe in 2016, late 2016, said that it was a bit of sulfur and other elements. And Dr. Michael Salas said, "Do you want to retract your statement? You said they were salt." And I said, "No, absolutely, it is salt. NASA's wrong." And he said, "Okay, well, time will tell. I'll let you know when the results happen." And I said, "No, absolutely, that is salt. There's a little bit of magnesium, and it's salt." And in August of 2020, so 4 years later, August of 2020, NASA published its findings that they concluded that it was briny salt, they said. So basically there's a geyser there, and the water evaporates into space and the salt snows back down, and that's what those white spots are. And I remember flying over it in a ship and seeing the geyser in somewhere around 1996 was when I went, and I remember the geyser went off randomly between 4 and 6 years increments, like it was random. So yeah, that checked out. So I that's what I mean. That if I didn't have things like that to support it, I would never speak publicly about it, because I've also, myself and my family, have gotten a lot of hate over it, because people don't want to believe this stuff. They think that you're out to profiteer, and it's sucked up my life. So, and I want to say that real quick. I know you have more questions.
No,
I'm on a run. I'm on a long run.
Yeah, keep going.
But I want to say real quick that 8 years ago, I got my memories back, and 7 years ago, I started doing interviews, and it took up every weekend, at least every Saturday, ever since. So pretty much every week for 4 or 5 hours a day since, I've been talking about this. And sometimes it's 10 hours a day, and sometimes it's 5 times a week. And so what happened is I do consultations. People get a hold of me and say, "Man, Tony, I think this happened too. Can I talk to you?" And I can't keep up with it all. Really, I literally can't. I have a ton of emails I can't get back to. Like, there's a lot of people. I'm not the only one. Maybe I'm the only one fool enough to go public with it. But there are thousands of people that have talked to me that said they felt like they went through the same thing, and they saw my interview and it jogged their memory. So that's important. But I want to say that I added a fee to sort people out, because I was also getting people that were kind of, picking on me. So I put a fee there. And I do make a little bit of money at this with the book and that fee, and then there's a Patreon account, but mostly to avoid the censorship and the abuse from the public is why there's a $5 paywall on my show, and why there's a consult fee. So I did not do this. I went for 5 years. I said, I absolutely will not receive money from this, and this isn't what I'm after. I just want to share it. But I know it always comes up, because that's where I'm at now in my process. I'm somewhere now where I'm pretty much, this is all I do anymore, is I do these interviews, and I'm writing my next book, and I talk about this a lot, because this is a big phenomenon. This isn't there's only a few people that talk about it publicly, but there's actually quite a bit of people that, like you said, it resonates with greatly. Okay, I'm done with my.
And I think that's important
synopsis.
to bring up, because I think that that's an, you know, we still are in a currency system for now, you know, that hopefully will change, but that's your energy, you know, and that's your research, and that's many, many years of traipsing through traumatic experiences and helping support people put pieces of the dot together. So, you know, I think that, you know, that's just an energetic exchange, and that, you know, that helps to support you continue doing that work. And I think that's really important for people to understand that, you know, and I can relate to that, you know, that we put a lot of work and energy into this greater movement to help support humanity, uncover, heal, and yeah.
Well, let's not forget also that the main reason that people are scrutinous of anybody that makes a dime talking about ufology is because so many people have came and made up so much lies and fatigued. And there's been a lot of rug pulled out under the secret space program experiencers like myself, the whole 20-year phenomenon, people going back. So a lot of whistleblowers, not a lot, but one prominent one recently came out and said he made up a lot of it, and he's profiteering and suing people. And so it just puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth. And it's a shame, because, you know, it immediately turns you off and disgusts you when you see people that are lying and profiteering, and it turns you away from the information, which is profoundly important to know. And so, you know, that's why I address it immediately, because it's a turn off for people. But there's the reality that, you know, there's only so much talking on your spare time you can do before it ruins your life.
Yeah.
And it has. And, you know, like, I want to say that, you know, I've had negative attacks on me in the past, and even like last night I tuned into a YouTube and they were making fun of me, and but more power to them, right? Like, good, whatever. It's your sovereign right to either believe me or be skeptical of me, and if you don't like me, just keep going. There's plenty more to watch, and if you do believe me, there's plenty of more info to research, and everybody has their right to that. But yeah, I just like to address that, because it seems like recently this is kind of all I do now. And so you know, just being honest, just being out there with people. That's what got me here the whole time. Every interview that I've ever done, I've just said honestly what I felt, and that's why it's still going, I guess.
And I appreciate that, and I think that there is a vibration or an energy that can be felt up in terms of truth and authenticity. And I think people who resonate at that vibration can feel that, can understand or sense that sincerity. And I think when you listen to information, it's not just hearing the information. There's an energetic exchange that you can feel in your body what's true, what's not. And I think if people are able to harness that ability to feel into their own discernment, then that helps to navigate through these sort of treacherous terrains that we see in the community, where things are sort of firing left, right, and center, and there's all this commotion and, you know, back and forth. I think it's, you know, it's about coming back to your own, you know, personal experience and what resonates for you, what helps support you, and throwing out the rest. So, you know, your story may resonate with a lot of people, but it may be other people that they have a different experience, and then there's the contrast, but doesn't take away from the fact that what you're presenting is real and true. It just it collides with other people's reality, that they might have a different experience. I guess that's just how
Sure. And you know, a logical way to think about it is that, you know, there's a lot that I remember. So when in terms of presenting information, like, you read my book, like, imagine all those experiences. If you read my book and look at it as life experience, all of those memories came to me in a few hours one day. It hit me, and I went, oh God, that was real. And it kept going for like 3 days of just big chunks of the book, you know, and it was in the form of memory. But with all of that, I don't know it all. Really, there's a lot that I don't know. I'm just presenting what I remember, and my intention is that I give you, anybody that reads it or anybody that sees an interview that I do, I give you a piece of a puzzle. And I'm hoping, and it's great, because other people that have wildly different testimonies that are also along the same lines are another piece of the puzzle from the other side of it. And so I don't know it all, and I would never proclaim to say that. I would just say that, I know that it happened, and I know that every time I check something out, it checks out. It doesn't disprove me. It actually supports me, and I'm still going. And now, because of the lawsuit talk and all that, I'm really kind of doing another round of research. I'll be going back to Seattle. I'm trying to go to Peru. I'm learning Spanish so I can go there. I want to go there and, support my testimony because it's important. And, but my testimony isn't the only one. And if anything, when you look at all of ufology, what I found by working with other people is that it's all over the place. It's very fragmented. People are being contacted. People are being abducted and contacted and interacted with on every level, from seeing a ship fly quickly over in the night, to being taken, to being interacted with, to being telepathically interacted with, and spiritually and astrally interacted with while they're in their sleeping space. So there is all forms of contact that are happening, and I believe they're all correct. There's not like my aliens are better than your aliens. That's not the case. What it shows us is that the scope of contact, it isn't just one group. It's millions of different groups that fly through. Like the reality is that space is teeming with life, that pretty much all the stars have somebody around them, and that they can travel everywhere very quickly, that it's not a long trip. So there's a trillion stars in our galaxy, and there's a trillion galaxies, and they can all interact with us. So they fly through, they come and interact with us for whatever reason, and they leave. And we have local groups that do a lot of the interaction, but we have many others that just come in from somewhere else, and they have different reasons and different levels of technology and different appearances. And that's what ufology, that's why researchers can't make sense of ufology, because it's so fragmented, and the level of technology from one account to the other is very vastly different. So in the scheme of things, I wasn't in a very high-tech situation when I was up there. I was in a high-tech situation compared to us, but in the scheme of the cosmos, there are many species. We were aware of it too in Ceres colony. There are many species that are millions of years more advanced than what the space program is now, the deep space program.
And I don't know if you would like to comment or talk about it. I know that we've spoken off camera, and you do consulting work, and you speak to people to help them unpack their memory. And I think that's a great way to do that, because on one-on-one, you can get so much information out through conversation and sharing information, which paints the bigger perspective and the bigger picture. And I think you have a great bird's eye view of that. And it almost allows you to categorize or have a look at perhaps different categories that helps understand our human mind to get our head around it. Would you like to speak to that? Because I think your consulting work has painted a really great picture of research to try and put the pieces of the puzzle together.
It's funny that I never set out to be a researcher, because I'm not a what's the word, studious person. Like I'm not a bookworm kind of guy. And but I never set out to become a researcher, but it fell in my lap, because all I wanted to do, I knew what it felt like. In the beginning, I had no one to talk to, and I was all alone with all these memories, with the sum of that book in my head, and trying to figure out what was going on. I had nobody to talk to, and I knew if I got counseling, I would be immediately medicated. I knew that there was no answer. If I paid the money and went and got a counselor, there was going to be no real meaningful answer there. And I remember what that felt like. So when people started to contact me, Tony, I saw your interview and I really don't have no to talk to. Can I talk to you? I felt for them, and I know what it felt like. So then I started doing consultations, and then there were so many that I couldn't keep up with them all. And people started saying, "Man, you're a jerk." Like you said you were going to talk to me. You never know. I'm like, I couldn't keep up with it all. So I was making people mad. But early on, very early on, in that time, when I was dealing with people, I was able to group everything into 3 categories. So what I found was that people, because I'm always looking for, when people tell me what happened, I'm like, okay, tell me what happened. And I'm looking for them to tell us that other people told me that they couldn't know. That really is a shortcut to going, wow, this person's, this is probably real. and I should listen to everything else they have to say too. Because if nothing ever happens, I don't doubt it, but then I can't, I tell people straight up, like, there's nothing here I can work with. You may have had this happen, you may have had that happen, but I don't really have a lot to work with here. Or I tell people, like, look, this is exactly what other people have told me, this, and this, and what do you think about this? And that's kind of how they end up. But I was able to group into 3 categories very, very quickly, and they're like this. Category 1 is a human space, deep space program. So they were calling it secret space program, but we're all kind of agreeing that we have a space program that's public, and we have an unknown space program that we're aware of now that goes into deep space. So we call it the deep space program, whatever. Category 1 is the deep space program. So human ran space programs, either from humans from Earth or humans from one of the colonies in the solar system. So there are colonies, there's a Mars Colony Corporation, Ceres Colony Corporation, other on and on and on and on. Other places there's so many of them. There's probably well over 100 different colonies out there. So those people that are taken into that category have a level of technology. They're often taken for a 20-year time, or they're taken several times as a child and then put back for whatever reason. Like they're taken at a young age, and many times, they're taken for a month and then they put them back, and they're using time travel. They're using the time travel tech. And it usually sounds like being in the military, like being in an army. It's that kind of lifestyle. So there's a lot of denominators there. So that's a humans program. Category 2 is a local group called the Orion Group.
Oh, can I just backtrack 1 second?
Sure.
With the category 1, are you finding certain anomalies of people who live in geographical locations?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. So what I found with that group is that they tend to be, so when you're talking about the military programs, they tend to be taken from Europe and America. So that's not that they're not taken from elsewhere. They're taken from all over the globe, but the bulk of them, 95% of them are Americans, Canadians, some Latinos, then Europeans, English, French, all the way over to, Romania, Bulgaria, Russia, all of those. So those are all in those programs, and it's kind of like that category. Also, the phenomenon of the 20th, so there's a genetic barrier. So it's not racial, it's genetic. Some races
thank you. You just answered my next question.
Yeah, it's not a racial barrier, it's a genetic barrier. In other words, the technology to work. And I don't know if it's the travel, where people, here's what it is you'll go through an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a wormhole or a portal. I hate all those words, but you'll go through a portal, which is an instantaneous transportation to somewhere very far away. If you go through that portal, you don't have the genetic makeup, you'll get very sick. It's that simple. So some people can do it, and they find that the Caucasian race has a higher number of those genetics. So you're likely, as a Caucasian, I'm always, even people that are very dark in complexion, that have, a dark color, and I go, what is your nationality? They go back to, a Scandinavian lineage. So that genetic marker is more likely, but that doesn't mean there are African people, African American people. There's a great deal of Latino people. There's a great deal of dark people. The Caribbean go. So it's global. This is a global phenomenon. But there is a genetic barrier. Not everybody can go. So that's the reality. That's what I remember, and it's what I found in my research. So so the second category is probably the worst, and because everybody that's in the second category, including myself, tends to have a horror story involved, and that's the Orion Group. So that's a local group. It's like an alliance. It's like a group of worlds, thousands of worlds that band together to make one entity, like a political entity, and they share resources and military, and they sponsor each other to travel through space. It's like you gang up. When you're a species and you get space travel, you have to gang up. Otherwise, the other gangs will take you. It's the same dynamic as, in nature. So birds do this, they flock, fish do this. and species do this on a grand scale throughout so it's the same thing. But the Orion group has humans as members, but not as many as they have other species, reptilians and insectoids and the grays. So they, when they take people, it tends to be for a more nefarious experience. And so when people are unpacking, I say, tell me what happened. And they start to say, I got tortured. And then I remember being put in a machine that hurt. And I remember being this and that. And then they put me back and I was bleeding. I start to say, well, describe what they look like. And you get the same cast of characters all the time. And so I call it the Orion group. It may not be entirely limited to the Orion group, but pretty much that's my second category. And I really feel for people that end up in that category. And I've heard some really horrible things that I never shared. I never will.
Yeah. And in terms of like geographical location or genetics, what does that sort of category look like when you break it down in terms of like
the Orion group is still in the same thickness of the United States, Canada, and Europe. They do get people from it is a global phenomenon, but they are still primarily Europeans. Mm-hmm. That I'm hearing. You're Americans and Europeans are the most part of that group. And then category 3 is everybody else. So category 3 includes people that are being visited on an astral level or a dream level, and they get taken. They see transparent ships. Mm-hmm. That's actually quite common, is that people will be standing and they see a ship land right over them. Mm-hmm. I could see it, but nobody else could, and it was right there. Mm-hmm. I was standing in the ship and everybody else was standing. I was there with my wife and kids, and they didn't know. I was the only one that could see it. And there were guys in the ship that were talking to me telepathically, and then they just took off. Mm-hmm. Or they started working on people. And then, like that's a common thing too. That's category 3. And that's a much higher level of technology, obviously. Mm-hmm. So category 3 is everybody else. And category 3 geographically tends to be outside of the States and Europe. So people in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Australia, in South America, and so that tends to be the category 3 people. But this isn't limited. I don't want to say that that's the deal. Yeah. I want to say that most of the people that have been contactees from Australia have been category 3. So very few human programs, very few Draco programs, but a lot of random programs, or a program that I'm unaware of. That's a group of worlds that I'm unaware of. Put it that way.
Do you know any sort of beings that are connected to the category 3? Is it kind of vast? Is it mainly higher dimensional? Is it
No, it's literally everybody else. So it could be anybody else. So when you think about in terms of space travel, everybody's greatly programmed to think that if we did get into space, it's still so far away. It would take years to get anywhere meaningful. And, the other side of the galaxy, I don't know, it's too far. They might get it to a couple stars, but that's it. And, to another galaxy, there's no way. There's no way you can get there. But the reality is that they use natural wormholes, Einstein-Rosen bridge wormholes or portals. They use natural occurring ones. They do occur in nature, and they can connect 20 galaxies together, and then they find another one and go to the next 20, and they can go right back. So in this course of one day, you can go to 2 or 3 other galaxies, several worlds in that galaxy, and be home in time for dinner. And be home at the same time you left, if you choose, because to use the wormhole tech to travel space, you can also travel time. And with the right amount of technology and computer programming, they can chart a course right back to just a few moments before or after they left. Mm-hmm. So that's the reality of space travel. So let's unpack that. So most people go, yeah, great, whatever. But when you do the numbers on this, so our galaxy has, I think it's 500 billion stars. 500 billion, it's somewhere in there. Our galaxy, but there's 500 billion galaxies that are nearby. And so if you can access those with all those trillions of stars, and only 1 in a billion stars has life, it's billions and billions of worlds. But the reality is that it's more like 7 out of 10 stars has an Earth. around it. That was the Law of One book said that, and that was close to the number that I remember. That was kind of the circumstance that I remember. So when you look into the sky, every 7 out of 10 stars has a world, an Earth, a habitable planet with a civilization on it, whether or uncivilized with a base on it. Everywhere, every star, 100% of the stars has somebody there with a base or a ship occupying that space for resources and for real estate. And that's the scale of intelligent life, and they're not all the same. They're not all on the same page, and some of them are radically different. We wouldn't even understand them, but they're people like us. So that is the bulk of, that's what category 3 is, because they can come here from anywhere from trillions of stars away in trillions of galaxies and pop into our area, look around and go, oh, look at this planet. Let's take some of that DNA and come down here and do their experiment. You know, the same way that we would explore and take souvenirs back. We would go to an island that's never been explored. We would take rocks, we would take plants, we would take things and take it back and study it. So there's that category 3, I think, is largely that, just an exploration. People that are exploring from very, 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 very far away, and they're going home immediately. It's not a long voyage for them. There's no 5-year voyage to seek out new life. It's every day. We left every morning and we got home every day. We did not sleep on the ship. We slept in our base because we came back, and we went very far. I went to other galaxies while I was working as a cargo engineer on that ship.
And do you see that people's experiences can blend through some of the categories? Like,
yes. So I could call it a 4th category, but it's not in itself. But so in the place that you get when you go into a higher focus state, like we're talking about that late dream stage, when you get into that REM sleep, that whatever you want to call it, theta, or whatever they call it, into that stage, you're in touch with not only your hidden memories, but in past life memories, future memories, other people's lives memories. Like you're in kind of, they call it, the CIA did a lot of work on it, the science behind it. And they call it the absolute infinity. So there's a science away, because your brain is electrical, and the electron, when you get a brain wave that's going very quickly up and down, when the electron changes direction, it occupies a smaller a bit of space than a Planck distance, which actually clicks out of space-time. So when you're in a very high, when you're in a wavelength like this, it's not like that. You're just in your day to day that you're awake. But when you're dreaming and you get to that high spike, the electron changes direction so much that you can access. And that's really the science behind how they explain psychic phenomena. And in that state of mind, in that focus state, you have access to outside of time space, literally. So there are other people out there. There are you out there, and there's no future and past or distance. So that's why remote viewers can see things on the other side of the world and on other planets, and in the past and in the future, because they're simply just clicking into what the CIA called absolute infinity. And anyhow, I think, is that good end to your question?
Yeah.
There's another thing I wanted to answer, I forget.
Do you think that everyone has the potential to be able to access that state?
Absolutely. Oh, everyone does, whether you like it or not. So we are doing that. That's why we have to go to sleep every day, is because in that state of mind, we all agree to not remember. So how many times, everybody knows the sensation of having a wonderful dream that was so promising. This dream is awesome. This is the best dream ever. And they wake up, I can't wait to tell everybody, oh, you wouldn't believe this dream I had. What was it? Shit, I don't know.
Gone.
It's because we've agreed to forget. Because in that state of mind, we communicate with each other. We secure permissions for the near future with each other in that state of mind. This is also covered in some of the CIA work and in Isaac Benthov's Stalking the Wild Pendulum. So what happens is, while you're sleeping, your electrons are clicking out, but you are kind of getting caught up in the ionosphere. I don't want to lose people here, but they said that there's a phenomenon in the ionosphere, like you're giving off a radio signal from your mind, and we communicate on a subconscious level. So we see the future because we're vaguely outside of the onion of time space, and we see the future and we go, oh, that's going to happen, and we meet with each other and we secure permission. Why me? How many times does something bad happen? You go, I don't believe, why did that happen to me? People are in disbelief. Well, you did secure permission, and there is a reason, but we've agreed to forget our that side of what we do. But we do a lot of work, and I teach this because of what I learned researching my phenomenon. I teach this to people, is that's where you start to make changes. In your sleep. You've got to take your intention to bed with you, what your intent, because you do a lot of work while you're sleeping, you just don't realize it. And if you take the intention with you to sleep, then you begin securing permission in the future from other people, because you are in a creative reality. You can manifest your own reality, but it also is contingent on the people that share your reality. In other words, you can't just say, give me all the money, because we all need money too. You can't say, I want every dollar that was ever made, and I'm going to manifest that I create that. Well, it's not going to work, because other people have a say. So if you co-create things that other people agree with, it happens quickly. And if you co-create things that is bad for other people, not only does it happen slowly or difficultly, but it has a consequence. So there are ways around it. The ancients, the elites use it. They know what they're doing. And we do a lot of work while we're sleeping. We do a lot of work, and it's, I teach different ways. I have it on my Talks with Tony show. I have a 2 or 3, and we meet. It's a group. We meet. We do synchronized intention meditations at the same time for one person. We pick one person, and that's whatever they want. That's what we do, and it works. It works like a charm. And it was all based on information I found researching my testimony. But I would say that anybody, but when you go to, if you have a problem in life, think about it. Think about, I want this to be fixed. I want to be over this. I want to be better. I want to quit this. I want to do this. I want to that. Think about it and dwell on it in a peaceful way to your highest good right before you go to bed, and do it every day. And you'd be surprised how quick your life turns around.
I love that. That's beautiful, beautifully poetic. I'm so glad you shared that. Do you have any tips for people who want to be able to access more recall, in terms of when you wake up in the morning and you
Yes. Well, the first thing is there's something called Hemisync, the binaural stuff. The Monroe Institute pioneered it. Bob Monroe, I think, invented it. Hemisync, where your hemispheres of your brain are not in sync, with it hurts. I'm not a brain surgeon, so I don't know the actual technical terms, but I know it works. And I know that if you do the Hemisync before bed for a couple nights, you will start to remember more of your dreams. Basically, I always get the hemispheres wrong, but basically your left hemisphere is 3D, thinks in 3D, and it's logical, like math and science. And your right hemisphere thinks in 2D, which is emotions and the absolute infinity. So when you're dreaming in the absolute infinity, your right hemisphere is doing all the communicating. But when it tries to translate to the left hemisphere and put it in a 3D sense, it doesn't make it. All of a sudden you go, man, I was dreaming, I was on a bicycle, and then it was a jet boat, and then I had a banana. I don't understand. And then there was a bird. I don't know what happened. It's because it's trying to make sense of a great deal of information. It's like a glitch, like a computer glitch, like a screen. So it's trying to take a great deal of information and translate it to your logical 3D mind from a 2D perspective. And your 3D mind spits out and goes, I don't know what he said. It looks like a banana. So that's what happens. And so when people get dreams like that don't make sense, I say, well, what did you feel? Because the emotion is the same, both sides. So if you had, I felt an impending sense of doom every time I looked at the bicycle. And I go, well, then I would tighten up and be very careful for the next, you're having a dream that's warning you, because you have this feeling. Or if they say, well, I don't know, everything was weird. It's like the plane was crashed. There was a plane crash and all this stuff in my dream, but I felt really happy. And I go, well, then just go with that. Then it was a happy dream. And the emotions are usually very accurate. But Hemisync will do it. There are monoatomics that do it. The Ethereum gold monoatomics. You can take maybe half a teaspoon of that before bed and do a cleanse. Also, a lot of people eat junk food and are not in shape. Your body is an instrument, and like it or not. And so it only takes so much abuse. And if you're full of junk and metals and poisons, you know what I mean? Then you're not going to remember. You're riding a rickety chariot, into the astral, a rickety chariot. So you want to be healthy. So in our group, there's a cleanse. We do a metal cleanse. We do a parasite cleanse. Everybody should do a parasite cleanse every year, everywhere, no matter what. People in America think they don't have parasites. They're better than everybody. Guess what? You have bacterial parasites. So you should do that every year. And you do a cleanse and take care of yourself, and then do the binaurals right before bed. And there's a few other things, and all of these things help. And you'd be surprised. You can remember, do the binaurals really work? There's some free ones on YouTube. The Monroe Institute's got 2 freebies, and you can just listen to one of those. That's a meditation. Those are a big help. The memory thing that you asked, I have a memory course that I do, and this was actually the most common reason that people reach out to me for a consult was, how do I remember this, Tony? I don't remember, but I remember this. It was in my bedroom. There was a gray standing there, and he said, come with me. And then I was in a big warehouse looking building, and there were people there, and there was this big tech thing, and that's it. I don't remember anything else. And I want more memory. So that was the typical call that I got. So I put it in a teachable. It's not even mine anymore. It's like I think it costs $40. I don't get any of the money. I gave it away. So it's not mine, but it does work. People do hypno-regression. That's where this goes. Like, people get memories and they jump straight into a hypno-regression. And I always tell people that hypno-regression is like a tattoo. You want a talented artist. You don't want to get somebody that's just going to whip together and be a stick figure you don't want somebody that can only draw a stick figure to make your tattoo. And a hypno-regression is something you need to find the best artist you can, and it stays with you. Your hypno-regression, your first one, stays with you. You're talking to your higher self. You're talking to past lives. There's a lot going on, and it stays with you your whole life. And I've seen botched jobs. That's how I know. People come to me after a terrible regression where they got front loaded with all these nonsensical notions that the hypno-regressionist instilled in them, trying to find their own, people. There are people in hypnosis that they want to put you under so that you'll tell them what they want to know. Because you're talking to your higher. They want to ask your higher self how to help them, not you. And I think that's the biggest problem. So hypno-regression, please find a very, very talented person with great referrals that's busy. I would say that. My technique. Oh, go ahead.
I agree with you in that context. And I think, especially through my work, I always say to people, find someone that resonates, who has had a similar experience, so they have the context and understanding to be able to hold the information. Because if you're going to someone who doesn't have that reference point, then it's going to come through a little bit distorted. It's not going to be clear. And yes, there will be suggestive imprints that perhaps aren't correct. So it's not going to be as effective if you're not meeting someone at the same sort of consciousness level as your experience and what you need in that moment. And generally, the right practitioner, if you set out the intention that you need support and you set that intention, the right person will fall in your lap. It will be like a synchronicity that all of a sudden someone suggested on YouTube or whatever social, and all of a sudden you will feel this resonance and you know that that is the right person.
And that's exactly how I mean by setting your intention before you go to sleep. You get those permissions. That's how life works. Those random things that are not lucky, they're lucky things. They happen, and there's science behind it. As I said, there's science, but that's a great point. In the beginning, when I had my memories back, I got back large chunks of memories, and they were all the emotional spikes. So the book is actually like that. So, even if I ask anybody, you take anybody that's 40 years old and say, where were you on your birthday when you were 21? On your 21st birthday? And they go, oh, I remember that. That's easy. We went out. It was my birthday. We could drink. It was my drinking day. So my mom came down, and they can give you all. They go on and on and on. If I say, where were you on the 150th day? What do you do for a living? And they go, I'm a thingamabob. Where were you on the 150th day of your job? Fuck, they don't know. Excuse my language, but pardon my language, but they're like, I don't know. I don't care about that. There's no emotional spike there. It's a daily grind. It's a boring, mundane, blurry grind of a memory. It's very hard to get that memory out. It's very, very hard to get that memory because it's obscured in the same amount of emotional background noise as every other boring day. The days that something good happened, the day that you fell in love, the day that you got your first punched in the eye for the first time, the day that you got your job or your favorite car or won the race, whatever it is, you remember those emotional spikes very easily because they stand out. And in the beginning, in my circumstance, I was doing interviews and I was getting grilled quite a bit. And people were like, I had all these great memories of times that were emotional, bad, good and bad. But this one guy interviewed me and he goes, well, how did you get a haircut up there? You were in a space. You were in a colony that had space travel with aliens walking around. How did they cut your hair? And I said, I don't remember right now. I guess, let me think about it. He goes, what about like brushing your teeth? Was the toilet high tech? What was going on there? And I thought, man, and it really bothered me because for a couple of weeks after that, I thought I should know this. If this happened to me, like all this stuff adds up that these are real memories. I should know this. Well, oh my. And so I started reading, like Googling like ways to improve your memory. And like rosemary, I got rosemary essential oil and I dump it on my shoulder and I could reek like it. And it's like, it's supposed to help you. And I would do that. And I did, like meditating. And I did not want a regression at the time. And I did not know where to get one. I lived on Maui at the time. And I had no clue where to find one. So I got in, what happened was I started doing, I was also trying to write my book, and they put blocks in you when they put you back. They put very deep, very industrial grade hypnotic blocks so that when you start recalling the memory, you'll get drowsy. There's people that have read my book that have told me, like, Tony, I'm a book reader. I can devour most books, even giant books in inside a couple of weeks. I read constantly. And I read your book and I got 3 pages in and I fell asleep. And the next day I read more and I fell asleep. Every time I touch your book, I'm sleepy. And I go, well, and they go, I think I was involved. And I go, well, that's typical. That's exactly how that works. It was the same way writing it. It was difficult. That's why it took 6 years to write a book that people could read in a few days. But it was like that. And so what I found to defeat the blocks was that first thing in the morning when I was awake, because I was getting drowsy. So I thought, well, don't do it at the end of the day when I'm tired from working all day. Let me do it in the morning, right when I get up, and I'd get my cup of coffee and I'd sit and try to write my book. And what I found was that like a muscle, it got stronger. And if I could do it for 5 minutes in the evening before I got sleepy, I could do it for 10 minutes in the morning. And so I thought, I'm onto something here. And I started working on the memories on the toothbrush. I was like, how did I brush my teeth? They don't let you just, what was that? Was there a technology? Was it a pill or something? And I kept thinking about it and meditating. And then then it dawned on me, I'll do it in the morning. And I would think about it, meditate it. And it didn't take long. It only took me like 3 days. And I went, oh, wow. And it's the same. So there's a muscle action of your brain, but it works exactly like a muscle, but nothing like a muscle. In other words, you can feel your muscle getting sore. You really don't feel your brain getting sore. It's true. Yeah. Right. But it's the same action. So, when someone says, and I say this in all the interviews, and when I explain this, someone says, hey, remember me? You run into an old friend from your classmate from school. And they go, hey, man, remember that one time we were hanging out at the park and we had that one song was on the radio and that girl got in a car crash? And you go, what song was that? And you go, they're right there, right at that moment when you're reaching for that song that you don't know. You know it was there. You have the memory. You just don't have the song, and you reach for it and you go, there's a muscle action there. Right there, you're lifting. It's the same. You don't feel it. But in fact, your muscle of your brain, or however it works, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but in fact, the muscle part of it is under load. It's, you get what I mean? Like it's lifting. You're reaching for a memory that's there. The memory, the memory's there, and B, you can't remember it. So you're reaching for that. And you go, man, what is it? And you try it's on the tip of my tongue and you can't get it. And right. So here's what completes the action though. This happens pretty much for everybody every time, is you go, it'll come to me. And you let go of the load and you start thinking about something else. And sometimes very quickly, and sometimes not till later in the day. It was the Beach Boys. It was the Beach Boys. Remember, round, round, get around, I get around. Like all of a sudden the memory comes to you. So that is the process, because what's really happening, and this is my opinion, what's really happening is when you're reaching for it, it's your conscious mind, which is a big part of your frontal mind. You're reaching for it and it's not there. The memory is not stored in your frontal mind. Only your short-term memory is in your frontal mind. Your long-term memory is in your subconscious mind. So when you're reaching for it, your frontal mind is looking for it and it's not there. You'll never find it. You'll never find it unless it's in a short-term memory, unless it was recent. If it's a distant memory, you have to let the subconscious mind have it. So you let go and go, it'll come to me. Now your subconscious mind goes, here's that, and goes, oh, you're looking for that song? I remember that too. Let me go look. That was back here. And you've got a little assistant in the back of your mind that you don't even experience, is still looking for it all day long. And that was my exercise I did. I would get up in the morning. I remembered having on Series Colony. So I was going after how would I brush my teeth? And I remembered waking up in the morning. There was a buzzer that went off in the morning, and my terrible scratchy blanket. And I'd wake up in the morning, the lights would come on, and I remembered that terrible feeling on days that I'd worked late. And there was a clear memory. It's clear. It's an emotional feeling because it was despair. And so these were clear memories. And I remember waking up and I go, what happened next? I walked and I could see it in my mind. And I'd walk down the hall and out through the security checkpoint. And then we had to walk into the locker room and take off our clothes and go to the shower. And then we'd wait in line, which is terrible. And then after the shower, we went over to the sink area and we had disposable toothbrushes. They were in a little plastic thing and there was a big trash can there, and we'd pick our disposable toothbrush and there was a giant dispenser and we held it under there and went, and we brushed our teeth and threw it away. And we went, and they had very little crappy bristles. It wasn't good. It was like a 3D printed toothbrush that they mass produced, that they were disposable. And the memory came back because every morning for 3 or 4 days, I thought that process, what happened. And then I go, it'll come to me. And then sure enough, later on in the day, I went, oh my God, they were disposable. And that's how I unpacked a lot of memories. And that's in a nutshell my course. I just shot myself in the foot. So if you were going to purchase my course, there's a few other, I'll say it like this, there's a few other little tricks in there. But that's it. I mean, try it. And the difference is because it's a long-term memory, not a short-term. We use the muscle for our short-term memory is very, very strong. You use it every day, all day long. Everybody does all day long. Very few people use their long-term memory very much. So your long-term memory is atrophied. You just don't use it. So anyhow.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for going into that in such fine details. And I think that, that's part of the concept of wanting to present this is showing people different ways and techniques and methods that they can heal, become more integrated, more validated, I guess, and find ways that they can support themselves, whether that be through the techniques that you've described and shared so graciously, or if it's through, support of someone else. So I think if it's okay, I just want to take a quick break and we'll come back. I have a series of questions. I want to dive a little bit deeper into understanding the process of cloning and consciousness transfer, if that's okay. So sure. Stay tuned and we'll be back.